Oh, that's cool. I was hoping that's what we were doing, but I didn't want to see.
So we have a situation on our hands, ladies and gentlemen. The notification came in through Park Dispatch that we have a solo unescorted hiker in distress somewhere in Thompson Woods. Here's what we know about our search query. Mobility is 1 mile per hour. Activity is hiking and a hover pod, meaning that difficult terrain is not so difficult for this particular individual. Last known location was Ag Building Trailhead, not out the forestry wing, but the next one over. Intended destination. Student Center. Our target never arrived. Target has been missing for about half an hour. So, using your maps, and in particular the annotations on your map of where to search first, where to follow up with a visual inspection if you don't find our target along the area of your first search. For safety's sake, we need to work in at least teams of 2 so that we don't create a new search and rescue situation. In reality, depending on the urgency of the extraction, it's going to be individual, typically forest protection officers, law enforcement rangers, that sort of person, maintaining radio contact and radioing their positions fairly continuously back to dispatch so that everybody has a working picture where everybody else is. For larger search efforts, we typically go in group sizes of minimum 4, so that if somebody, while they're searching, steps in a hole and breaks an ankle, you've got someone there to render aid to the searcher and 2 people to go back together to get help for the searcher now in distress. Does that make sense? So minimum group size of 4 in that case. But for us, in Thompson Woods, 2's probably okay. We're never more than about screaming distance away from safe extraction. So go ahead and gather your things. In particular, you want to have your map and notes out. And this is the best photo we could recover from the Search Quarry's Facebook feed or something. This is the way. All right. Cool.
This is my find. Do you want to leave him there for the next party, or?
Yes. Once you find him, take a picture with your phone and come on back. Don't spoil it for everybody else. Grogu's grateful family, which is mostly slaughtered during Order 66, sends their sincere thanks for your dedicated effort in putting yourself in harm's way to try and find their loved one. Okay, so let's debrief. How did that go? Did that go pretty well as expected, or was this a bit of a surprise?
As expected.
As expected. How so? Why did it go as expected? What did you expect?
You know, if it's raining, then they're probably going to want to take shelter under something.
Yeah, good thinking. Okay. So here in Southern Illinois, a lot of search and rescue translates into checking through bluff lines and rock shelters for pretty much exactly this reason, right? It's cold and uncomfortable when it's wet. We lose body heat up to 100 times faster, and that can at times outstrip your ability to replace that heat. So the moment you get wet is a problem. For winter athletes, managing sweat is a very important thing for exactly that reason. Okay, anybody else? Go as expected or surprised? And why was it as expected or surprised?
I imagine because you followed the waterway to the bridge. I don't know if that would actually be what it is, or if you just found the bridge by wandering around. The waterway leads straight to the bridge from there. Pass off the trail. So.
Yeah, in our scenario, what happened was this. Baby Grogu started on a hike at our trailhead entry point, intending to go to the student center. Grogu made it almost the entire way before losing the path and getting into the waterway and following the waterway down. So it's kind of a textbook case of what we had been describing and discussing before spring break. That is, people make one of a fairly limited set of choices on what to do, where to go, if they decide to continue moving. Grogu, in this case, as a not highly trained outdoors person or outdoors being, did not know that the safer move is to stay put when you get lost. And that is as to be expected based on the picture that we have going on. So, the basic sense of search and rescue is exactly this. And if you guys like, as the weather warms up, we can do one or more additional exercises, maybe around Campus Lake, for example, a larger search area, but the exact same techniques and principles hold true. So it's not necessarily a lot more work to search a much larger area for something that's difficult to detect as something that is gray, green, and brown in the woods. Okay, cool. So we're gonna springboard forward from this into kind of the larger picture of human behavior and motivation in forest and outdoor rec. We got to contend with all of the environmental, all of the climate factors, all of the preset pattern factors in forest management. And when we're managing any of these places, typically recreation is a component there, or any kind of human use. Recreation including hunting, fishing, right? That's a lot of territory, that's a lot of habitat. So, with motivation, motive is a reason, right? So when you're watching crime dramas, motive is, what did this person believe about the situation? What reason did it give them to do whatever they did? Motivation is kind of the distillation of motive of what propelled somebody into action. What was the reason they actually did the thing? They went out and got lost. Went out and tried to go on a fishing trip. Went out and tried to have a nice picnic with their family or whatever. So, motivation is absolutely key in understanding the human wildlife species for forest management, and in particular, forest rec management. So, in your mind's eye, think back to the most recent forest and outdoor recreation trip that you went on, whether it was a walk at Giant City State Park, or frisbee golfing around Campus Lake, or family time out wherever you guys like to go do your thing. And kind of rewind, what was the activity you did? And from that, kind of reverse engineer, what was the motivation that got you and your family, or you and your friends to go camping up north, or whatever that most recent activity is? We want to get after this motivation. Generally speaking, folks are going to try to connect the shortest distance or the least effort between motivation and actual on-site activity, on-site behavior, on-site decisions leading to things like search and rescue, or leading to things like environmental degradation, for example. Somebody's trampling a patch of rare, threatened, or endangered species, or plant community, something like that. That's happening for a reason. It's generally not totally on accident, totally not in a vacuum. Okay, so anybody, what was your most recent trip? And from activity, we're gonna back into motivation. Anybody?
I went camping last week in Giant City.
Okay, cool. All right, who are you with?
Just a friend of mine, just two of us.
Okay, small group, camping. Why? It was cold last week.
Yeah. I got a new 0-degree sleeping bag I wanted to test out. So.
Okay, right on. Cool. So motivation was testing gear. All right. Anybody else? What was the last trip you went on?
I went to Greer Spring.
Greer Spring. Greer? Yeah. What'd you do at Greer?
Hiked down to it, looked at it,
Okay.
wanted to see it, I heard it was pretty.
Here's your motivation. Heard it was pretty.
I think it's the prettiest spring I've seen so far.
Okay, not saying something. You lived around some very pretty springs over in Missouri.
Yeah, it's off 11 Point.
Okay. Cool. Anybody else?
We hiked the Little Grand Canyon.
The Grand Canyon, very cool. All right, who is we?
Just a friend of mine.
That's pretty steep in spots. And where it's steep, it's also kind of slick when you're going up and down some of those creek beds. What would make you want to do that?
Was when it was nice out. I hadn't been there, so kind of new scenery.
Okay.
Enjoy the weather.
There to discover it. Try it out for the first time. To try yourself at a new place for the first time. Does that make sense? All right. Why did the first folks summit Everest? Because it was there, is the famous quote. So, discovery is a thing. Pretty. First descents in kayaks are all the rage over the past 20 years in places like the Andes Mountains, where there's just some crazy, crazy whitewater, big drop, waterfalls, stuff like that. Some genuinely lethal rivers. But there's this line of people waiting to try and figuring it out and working in teams to scout each rapid, each hydraulic, figure out how to get through this alive without being physically torn apart by some of those hydraulic forces. This is a real strong motivation. Any of you guys and gals like to rock climb? Okay. Sometimes? All right. So with rock climbing, the equivalent of this discovery would be the so-called first ascent. So anybody who's into rock climbing, what what has to go into a first ascent. The first time anybody's gone up a particular rock face in a particular, very specific way called a route or a pitch. What goes into that?
A lot of planning.
A lot of planning.
What route you're gonna take.
Yeah.
Probably contacting people to make sure you can even go there.
So there's some logistics, there's some legal stuff and permitting if you're doing it on the up and up. That is not always the case, but in this example, we'll go with it. With a rock climbing route, you have to plan literally every spot that you're gonna put each hand and foot along the way. And if it's a long pitch, like several hundred feet, that's a lot of holds, as they're called. That's a ton of planning and work and going part way up and figuring out, oh, we run out of holds. If we go this direction, let's back it down 20% and see if we can go up this other way, and so forth. And just sort of this branching path mapping as you're going. It's a ton of work. But that sense of, I am doing something that nobody else in history has ever done before. That's a powerful motivation, and a very cool one, right? So, sometimes that motivation is pretty clear and pretty sensible. It makes a lot of sense that first ascents are cool in rock climbing. First descents are cool in kayaking. Discovery, or just going to a place because it's pretty and scenic. We are a wildlife species that has, as goofy and as touchy-feely as it sounds, we have emotional needs, right? We need beauty in our lives, and we need to go out and seek it. And we know that this is true because hundreds of millions of Americans are doing this every year and spending a lot of money and time to do it. This is important to them, so that makes it important to us as foresters. So, this is all valid. This works. This makes sense. This is the real thing. What that can lead to is that motivation leading to some difficulty with connecting with the satisfaction of that motivation. So in our example search and rescue exercise, Grogu wanted to go through Thompson Woods from the Ag Building to get to the Student Center. A very utilitarian, very sort of transport-oriented trip. And a trip that's more oriented towards discovery or experiencing the scenic beauty of Thompson Woods. Might be a much more meandering path. Make sense? So, motivation does a lot to shape what the experience is. It does everything to shape and drive the decisions that happen out of motivation. And as we were getting into just a little bit before spring break, there's this sense of beliefs drive motivations. If you don't know or you don't believe that Thompson Woods is worth walking around in, then you don't necessarily have any motivation to go there. Same thing with Little Grand Canyon or wherever, rock climbing or whatever the activity is. So belief towards motivation to decision to do the thing and then start to act. And the acting might be developing the route, or it might be just using the rock climbing route that somebody else has developed if the motivation is to use instead of to develop. Okay? So, from the action, we get all of the main effects, the satisfaction of putting up that first ascent, getting your name in the rock climbing guide for the region for the first time. That's a heady accomplishment for a lot of people because it is a lot of work to get to that point. And then as in medications, we have effects and side effects. One side effect of Grogu's decision to head through Thompson Woods, Baby Yoda's decision to head through Thompson Woods, was you got the effect of getting into, transporting to the site, starting the activity, and one side effect was getting lost. The side effect of that was having to undergo search and rescue. So there are always main effects, and there are always side effects. Okay? So a big chunk of recreation management is understanding what are the main effects, what's the best payoff for managing a place like Thompson Woods, for the motivations that are bringing people to Thompson Woods. How do we manage that site to keep the ecosystem maximally functional while delivering as much as we can on all of those main effects? And then also understanding what the likely side effects are going to be, because people get lost. People spin their knobby tires and absolutely shred slit trenches into the ground, into the soil, and turn that soil into dirt, throwing it up as rooster tails. We saw that before spring break with some of our technology videos and animated GIFs and stuff like that. Okay? So the management lives right here, delivering on effects, minimizing, mitigating, making less severe all those side effects. Planning is all about understanding this stage of the game, as well as the mechanics of this stage, of the action stage, the on-site behavior leading to effects. Okay? So, Grogu goes into the woods to get to the other side. Sounds like a chicken joke. And he gets lost. And while Grogu has a hover pod and is floating over the surface of the ground without impacting, without breaking the functional skeletal material, the cellulosic, the woody material of plants, we are definitely going to do that as we crash through. We pulverize the coarse organic dead down material layer, the topmost soil layer, the O1 soil horizon, as we walk on it, or as we ride a horse across it, or as we run knobby tires across it, and so forth. We cannot move through a space, according to our motivation to do so, without having some side effects. It just happens. Okay? So, our move for the rest of today is to get a sense of what effects and side effects map onto forest habitat here in southern Illinois. And so this is a pretty big list. Horseback riding, for example, is lots and lots and lots of people in this region, like lots of people in this region. And horseback riding has some main effects. People spend a lot of money on their horses, like a lot of money. It supports a lot of local businesses. It's actually a really cool thing. The Forest Service has spent $5 million in the past 10 or 15 years on horse trails alone in Shawnee National Forest. That's a lot of money spent for one specific activity on a pretty big area across southern Illinois. So the effects are not just physical, they're not just ecological, they're not just personal inside of us. Effects being experiencing the prettiness, the scenic nature of a place, experiencing discovery and personal development and accomplishing things, achieving things, developing that sense of self-efficacy we talked about at the beginning of the semester. There's a lot of economic activity as well. So when you go to REI or Shawnee Trails or Dick's Sporting Goods or Campmore or Sierra Trading Post or Walmart to get your camping gear, your backpacking gear, that money goes somewhere. And typically that money, believe it or not, ricochets around the community you spend it in on average 5 to 7 times before it leaves that community. The math is a little bit different when you spend it at Walmart, because that's going elsewhere pretty fast. But, for example, let's, how many people you got in your family here?
6.
6. All right, so let's say you bring the whole family over to southern Illinois for a weekend to enjoy the Shawnee instead of the Mark Twain over in Missouri. And you got 6 people. So you got to find lodging, get food, transportation, so gas and vehicle combined, and so forth, for 6 people. And when you get on site, that's going to be a cabin reservation, maybe 2 cabins if you're feeling flush, right? one for mom and dad and one for the kids, so you guys can have some privacy, right? We understand. There's a lot of money that goes into a simple trip for 6 people. All of the different things. And all of the small businesses that Gary and his family spend that money into, they are paying themselves, they're paying their employees, they're buying their equipment from a local dealership, usually, and so on and so forth. And so that money bounces around that community 5, 6, 7 times on average before it heads out to some bank somewhere, or heads out to Texaco, or British Petroleum, or something like that. Some big company that moves that money elsewhere and spends it in their community. So, forest and outdoor recreation has a huge, huge economic impact main effect. All right? So there's a lot of things going on anytime anybody moves into one of these spaces for forest and outdoor recreation purposes. It's not just the person on site getting their effect, it's all of the effects in the entire community around that. Which is why when the world shuts down with something like a COVID pandemic, that a lot of communities, because travel restrictions were one of the primary ways that people try to control the spread, this phenomenon, this process of belief and knowledge, through motivation, through deciding to act and experiencing the effects and side effects, causing those main effects and side effects and so forth, this wrecked economies all over the world because 1 in 6 people is directly affected by travel, tourism, forest and outdoor recreation. 1 in 6. That's like a lot of people. That's almost 17% of everybody, okay? So, shut down that part of the economy while everybody stays home and so forth, and things get real weird real fast. Imagine if somebody cut your paycheck, if you were the whole community, cut your paycheck by 17%-ish, and said, okay, just live on that for a while, right? That's a pretty big hit. So, this is a big deal. This has real consequences. All right. For the Shawnee National Forest, let's tally up a couple of different forest and outdoor recreation activities. What kinds of things are people doing around here for forest and outdoor recreation specific purposes? You tell me.
Hiking.
Hiking. What else?
There's a lot of rock climbing around.
A lot of rock climbing.
Kayaking.
Okay. What else? Horseback ride. What else?
Hunting.
Lots more. Keep on. Yeah, it's good. Hunting. All right. So-called extractive uses. All right, because we extract tasty venison from the forest ecosystem and keep on keeping on. What else? Mountain biking.
Camping.
Camping. And we'll combine camping and hiking to form backpacking. Had a couple of students on the River to River Trail over spring break. We haven't even touched on a couple of the biggest ones yet, believe it or not. How about wildlife viewing? And if you have more money than sense, some prosumer grade photography equipment, wildlife photography. This is one of the biggest ones. But we don't think about that as much because it doesn't, to some of us, it doesn't look as active as kayaking or rock climbing, like not being out there spidering your way up the rocks and so forth. It's just pulling off on the side of the road as you're driving down 148, cutting through Shawnee, and you see some snow geese coming through, or you see Emmy, my wife, and I were at Giant City State Park over the weekend at the Stone Fort Trail, just a quick little hike till you get some sunshine. And we saw a beautiful red-tailed hawk sitting on one of the baseball field backstops in Giant City State Park looking for field mice early in the season as they start warming up and waking up. And we just pulled off for a sec. Didn't even get out of the car, barely slowed down the car, but this is a thing. This is one of those hundreds of millions of events per year scale things, not just on the Shawnee, but across the United States. So when you ask people, hey, what are you doing? What brings you out into the forest? Some people say, I just like living in wildlife. And, you know, at certain times of the year, maybe I enjoy shooting at and eating wildlife, but for all of the year, at all of the places, whether it's a preservation-oriented wilderness area or national park where hunting is restricted or unavailable, respectively, or a national wildlife refuge where hunting is literally like one of the main points, this is a big deal. You can do this year-round. You don't need much of a permit in most all of these places for wildlife viewing. This is huge to a lot of people. Okay, this is really, really huge. So, with wildlife viewing, just as with something more active and typically expensive, more high skill like kayaking or rock climbing or any of these others, there's all of that suite of, we stopped at a local gas station and we got some venison sticks and some pickled eggs and some pig's feet and stuff like that from that weird cloudy looking jar by the cash register. And we have regrets now, but man, they were delicious at the time. Maybe. Like all of those positive economic impacts happen with wildlife viewing and with kayaking. All of those ecological negative impacts might happen with wildlife viewing as with kayaking and rock climbing. Even if it's not nearly as active or as flashy or as sexy or as cool as doing a first descent up any of the rock faces here in Southern Illinois. Okay? So, all that to say, we just want to make sure that we've got the full list. And the full list for any of these places, as it turns out, when you really start asking a lot of people, what brought you to the Shawnee? Or, you know, we look back through property and census records, we see that your family has been in this area for like 75, 80 years. How do you think about the Shawnee National Forest? How do you value the Shawnee National Forest? How do you use Shawnee National Forest? Are you always just driving through on 148? Or are you pulling off on the side of the road to do wildlife viewing or anything on a longer list? That list of different activities gets pages and pages and pages long. It's wild how much people use our public spaces. Pretty cool stuff. So, all of these have their associated main effects and their associated side effects and negative impacts. Let's go through a couple of these. So we were talking about trampling vegetation, like walking through the forest while we're lost, like Grogu, hovering along, and stepping on stuff and snapping branches, essentially breaking the bones morphologically of whatever woody plant, whatever shrub or tree seedling or whatever that you are walking across, and causing lasting harm and impact to that particular organism. Multiply that by 100,000, 500,000, a couple million visitors a year, and maybe multiple people are stepping on that same bush every single year, and pretty soon there's no bush there. And we have exposed soil. And exposed soil gets eroded away. And now we don't even have any soil left to grow a replacement plant. We've got to bring in, truck in, dump truckloads of soil to the backcountry to try and repair some of these places so that they don't get ridiculously out of control on impact. Okay? So, let's come back on Thursday. Hopefully it'll be a little bit warmer and we'll continue connecting the dots on how people use, how people value, how people derive benefits from forest and outdoor recreation stuff, and how do we get on top of and keep up with the side effects and impacts of it while reaping the benefits of positive economic impact and stuff like that. All right, see you next time. Nice work today. All right.